Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles. I've spent the last 12 years as a police officer, 6 of them as a detective. I've seen people at their worst, caught liars in the act, and built cases on details that most people overlook. You don't get far in this job if you don't develop an instinct for deception. But when it comes to your own wife, you hesitate. You tell yourself you're imagining things, that maybe you're just tired, overworked, paranoid. That's what I did, at least for a little while. Started small. At first, it was little changes, subtle enough that they could be explained away if I wasn't paying attention. Sarah had always been a routine person. She woke up at 6:30 a.m. every day like clockwork, made coffee, sat in the kitchen scrolling through the news before getting ready for work. But a few weeks ago, she started waking up earlier, sometimes before dawn. The first time I noticed, I woke up to an empty bed, the soft glow of her phone screen illuminating her silhouette as she stood near the bedroom window, whispering. She turned abruptly when she saw me wake up. Couldn't sleep? I asked groggily. Yeah, she muttered, locking her phone and slipping it onto the nightstand. Just work stuff. Go back to sleep. I wanted to believe her, but something about how quickly she hid her phone and how tense her posture was set off an alarm in my head. The password change. A week later, she changed the passcode on her phone, something she hadn't done in years. It wasn't that I had a habit of snooping through her messages. I respected her privacy, but it felt deliberate, like she was creating a barrier between us. When I casually asked, "Hey, what's the new code?" she froze for a split second before forcing a laugh. "Oh, I had to change it. I read this article about how hackers can guess your passwords based on fingerprint smudges. It's a security thing." It was a bullshit excuse, and she knew it, but I nodded and let it go. She never gave me the new code. The mystery car. That's when I started seeing the car. A black BMW 7 Series. Sleek. Expensive. The kind of car a high-profile lawyer would drive. The first time I saw it, it was parked down the street from our house. I noticed it in passing, late at night, engine running, someone sitting inside. But when I stepped outside for a better look, it drove off. The second time, I saw it near Sarah's office, parked a block away. The third time, it was at the grocery store where Sarah had just gone in alone. I strolled up casually, pretending to be checking my phone, and got a closer look. The driver was a man in his late 40s, well-dressed, sharp jawline, graying at the temples. He had the polished, confident look of a man who always got what he wanted. And the way he was looking toward the store? Like he was waiting for someone. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Then Sarah walked out. She didn't notice me, but I saw her glance toward the car before walking straight past it. Not stopping. Not acknowledging him. But the moment she got inside our car, her phone buzzed, and she checked it immediately. She drove home that night without saying a word. That's when I knew. Something was happening. Baiting me into a fight. It wasn't just the secrecy. It was her attitude shift. Sarah had always been level-headed, never the type to pick fights over nothing. But lately, she'd start arguments out of nowhere. Small things that she blew up into massive accusations. "You never listen to me anymore," she snapped one evening after I asked her a simple question about dinner. I frowned. "What are you talking about? I just asked if you wanted to eat in or order takeout." She scoffed, crossing her arms. "That's not the point. You're always controlling everything, always questioning me." I stared at her. "I asked about dinner." Her hands trembled slightly as she turned away. She was testing me, pushing, trying to get a reaction. I didn't take the bait. The locked drawer. The final red flag came a few nights later. Sarah always kept a small desk in our home office, a space for her to organize bills, documents, and other personal things. It was never locked. Until now. I walked in to grab something and noticed the top drawer had a brand new lock on it. I tested it. Solid. Keyed. Sarah had never locked anything in her life. I turned and found her standing in the doorway, arms crossed. "Why are you in here?" "Looking for the stapler." She hesitated, then forced a smile. "I just had some private paperwork in there. Legal stuff." "Legal stuff?" She was a corporate contracts manager, not a lawyer. She didn't handle legal matters in any way that required personal security. And even if she did, why the secrecy from me? The night that changed everything. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. Sarah was hiding something. The late-night calls. The password change. The mystery car. The sudden fights. The locked drawer. It all pointed to something deeper. And I was done playing dumb. The next day, I went to work as usual. But this time, I made a few special stops before heading home. A hidden camera disguised as a USB charger, placed in our bedroom. A second camera in the home office, facing the locked drawer. A burner phone with a GPS tracker, which I would slip into Sarah's car without her knowing. By tomorrow I'd have answers. But I had no idea just how deep the betrayal ran. I don't believe in coincidences. The moment Sarah walked out of that grocery store, glancing toward the BMW with its waiting driver, my gut told me everything I needed to know. She was hiding something big, and that car was part of it. The problem? I still had no proof. Cheating? Maybe. Something worse? Possible. I needed evidence, and I needed it fast. So that night, while Sarah slept, I took the first step in my investigation. I moved silently through the house, the way I had 100 times before when serving a warrant or making an arrest. The glow from the USB charger camera I'd installed earlier was faint but working. Good. Then I turned to the locked drawer in her desk. Cracking the drawer. Picking locks wasn't exactly part of police training, but I'd picked up a few skills over the years. This wasn't a high-tech security system, just a standard desk lock. I inserted a thin metal pick, turned carefully, and click. The drawer slid open. Inside, there were neatly stacked documents. At first glance, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But as I flipped through them, I froze. They were legal forms. More specifically, divorce papers. But they weren't just divorce papers, they were already filled out, signed by Sarah, and dated for next week. She was planning to serve me soon. Without a word. Without a fight. But that wasn't the worst part. Tucked underneath the forms was a printed email exchange between Sarah and someone named David L. Hartman Esq. My blood ran cold. Hartman was one of the top divorce attorneys in the city. Ruthless. Cutthroat. Known for getting women everything they wanted, no matter how dirty he had to play. My eyes moved further down the page. David. Everything is still on track. I'll make sure the incident happens before the weekend so we can expedite the restraining order. I don't want him in the house when this starts. Can you confirm how soon we can lock in the financials? Sarah, don't worry. As long as we have documented abuse, you'll have the upper hand. If he refuses to leave, call the cops. Make sure there are marks, nothing too obvious, just enough for the responding officers to consider him a threat. He won't see it coming. I clenched my fists so hard the paper crumpled in my hands. Documented abuse? Marks? She was planning to set me up. This wasn't just about her leaving. This was about destroying me, tracking her movements. The next morning, I acted like nothing had changed. Sarah left for work as usual, giving me a distracted peck on the cheek before heading out the door. The moment she was gone, I took the burner phone I'd prepared the night before and slipped it under the back seat of her car. GPS activated. Then I called in a favor. Carter, I said when my old friend picked up. Detective Carter was one of my closest allies on the force. He was also someone who owed me big time for covering his ass on a botched investigation last year. What's up? I need a plate run. Discreetly. He hesitated. This about work or personal? I said. I'll owe you one. He sighed. Send me the plate. I texted him the BMW's license number, which I'd memorized the last time I saw it outside our house. An hour later, I got a response. Registered owner, David L. Hartman. I stared at my phone, my stomach twisting into a knot. It wasn't just some random affair. Sarah wasn't sleeping with her boss. She was sleeping with the lawyer she hired to destroy me. Surveillance pays off. That afternoon, I parked 2 blocks away from her office, watching through my binoculars. Her work ended at 6 o'clock. But instead of coming home, she walked straight toward the black BMW, waiting for her near the corner. I snapped several photos as she climbed in. She wasn't being subtle. She kissed him. Right there. In the car. He drove off and I followed. They pulled up to the Grand Meridian Hotel, a 5-star place downtown, way out of her price range. So this is where it happens. I waited. 20 minutes. Then 30. Finally, they came back outside, laughing. Sarah clutched his arm like a teenager in love, completely unaware that her entire scheme was falling apart. I got more photos as they drove off together. Then I called Carter again. Need another favor, I said. What now? I need access to security footage from the Grand Meridian. He groaned. Jesus, man. Are you investigating your own wife? Not investigating. Building a case. The setup for her setup. I spent the next 2 days gathering everything I needed. Footage from the hotel security showing Sarah with Hartman. Bank statements proving she had been funneling money into a separate account. Copies of their emails plotting my abuse case. GPS logs from the burner phone tracking her movements. Everything. By the time the weekend rolled around, I was ready. I knew exactly what was coming. Sunday night, Sarah picked another fight. You don't love me anymore, she accused. I stayed calm. What are you talking about? You're always watching me. Always questioning where I go. She stepped closer, voice rising. You don't trust me. I don't feel safe anymore. There it was. The setup. She was building the story she'd tell the cops. I didn't take the bait. I just nodded, pretending to be hurt. The next day, while she was at work, I paid a visit to my precinct's internal affairs office. By the time she made her false police call, claiming she feared for her safety, and that I was getting violent, she had no idea that the police were already waiting for her. It was exactly 9:17 p.m. when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't even have to look. I already knew what it was. Sarah had finally made the call. I let it ring twice before answering. This is Officer Reynolds. There was a pause. Then a calculated sniffle on the other end. Jack, I don't know what to do. Her voice wavered, dripping with feigned vulnerability. I leaned against the counter, watching the hidden camera light blink softly from the corner of the room. Sarah? I asked, pretending to sound concerned. What's wrong? She took a deep breath, as if mustering the courage to speak. I'm scared. A sharp inhale. I just never know what kind of mood you'll be in anymore. And I can't keep living like this. She was laying the groundwork, building her case. I clenched my jaw. This woman, the woman I had once trusted with my life, was setting me up to be dragged out of my own home in handcuffs. I glanced at the front door, waiting for the knock. 5 seconds. 10. Then boom. 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 Police. Open up. Showtime. The arrest, that wasn't. I opened the door slowly, hands up, just like I knew they expected. 2 uniformed officers stood outside, both guys I'd worked with before. Their faces were stoic, professional. But there was something else beneath the surface. They already knew. Jack Reynolds. Officer Daniels asked, voice carefully neutral. That's me, I said. We received a report of domestic disturbance at this residence. I let out a slow breath, playing along. That so? Daniels nodded. Sir, we need you to step outside. I moved calmly, making no sudden movements, even though my blood was boiling. The second officer, Martinez, kept his eyes on me while Daniels spoke into his radio. Victim is inside. Requesting female officer for statement. I almost laughed at the word victim. Sarah had probably already bruised herself up, maybe scratched her own skin, all to make it look like I had attacked her. They thought this was just another domestic case. They had no idea what was about to hit them. Sarah's Oscar-winning performance. From the porch, I could see into the house. Sarah was standing in the living room, arms crossed over her chest, eyes red as if she'd been crying. She looked so small, so fragile. A perfect picture of a terrified wife. And then her gaze flickered toward me for half a second, a glimmer of satisfaction flashing across her face. She thought she had won. That's when Officer Daniels' radio crackled. Dispatch confirm. Suspect has prior abuse reports? A pause. Then, negative. No prior reports. No history of violence. Daniel's brow furrowed slightly. That wasn't standard in these cases. Sarah had been so confident, so sure that her lawyer boyfriend had prepared everything perfectly. But she had overlooked one thing. Me. The first blow to her plan. Jack, Daniel said carefully. We'll need to take your statement. Would you be willing to come down to the station? I exhaled sharply. Absolutely. Sarah's face twitched. That wasn't the reaction she had expected. She thought I'd protest, resist, demand to stay, giving her the chance to look even more victimized. Instead, I walked willingly to the squad car and slid into the back seat, calm as ever. The drive was silent, except for Martinez occasionally glancing at me through the rearview mirror. Finally, he muttered, "You're way too calm for a guy getting arrested." I smirked. "I'm not getting arrested." Daniels shot me a sideways look. "Yeah? How do you figure?" I met his gaze in the mirror. "Because you're about to see something that's going to change everything. Exposing the truth." 15 minutes later, we were at the precinct. I was uncuffed immediately, another red flag for Sarah's case. Daniels and Martinez led me into an interrogation room, but there was no hostility, no aggression. They weren't sure yet if I was guilty. That was about to change. "Jack," Daniels started, flipping open a blank notepad. "Why don't you tell us your side?" I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. "I'd rather show you." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. Daniels exchanged a glance with Martinez. "What's that?" I slid it across the table. "Video evidence. Recorded in my own home." A long pause. Then, without a word, Martinez grabbed his laptop, plugged in the USB, and hit play. Sarah's scheme falls apart. The first video came up on screen. Sarah, standing in the bedroom, rehearsing her fake sob story in the mirror. "He's scaring me, officer. I don't feel safe anymore." She sniffled dramatically, practicing different tones. "He grabbed me. He pinned me down." She shook her head. No, too much. Keep it simple." The officers stared at the screen, then at each other. Then came the second video, the one from the home office. Sarah on the phone. "Yeah, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll call and say he got aggressive. Make sure the paperwork is ready." A male voice, Hartman's, responded, laughing. "Good. Once he's out, I'll make sure we freeze the accounts." I sat back, arms crossed. The room was dead silent. Martinez muttered, "Jesus Christ," under his breath. Daniels shut the laptop. He looked shaken. This is," he cleared his throat. "This is enough to file a false report charge. Maybe even conspiracy." I nodded. "That's why I came here first." Daniels exhaled slowly, rubbing his face. "You just dodged a bullet." I smiled. "No. Sarah just walked into one. The arrest that did happen." Back at the house, Sarah was probably smiling to herself, waiting for the call that confirmed I was in lockup. Instead, she got a different call. One that sent 2 more squad cars to our address. By the time I arrived, Sarah was already outside in her robe, screaming at the officers. "This is a mistake. He's the monster." Martinez was holding a clipboard with printed evidence from her own emails and text messages. "Ma'am," he said, voice bored. "We have video recordings, GPS tracking, and written proof of your intent to frame your husband." Sarah's face drained of color. No, you don't understand. I was scared. He's manipulative." Daniels grabbed her wrists. "Sarah Reynolds, you're under arrest for filing a false police report, perjury, and conspiracy to commit fraud." The exact charges she wanted me to face. As he snapped the cuffs on her, her gaze shot to me. Pure hatred, pure disbelief. I smiled. "Guess you should have hired a better lawyer." The next morning, I woke up to pure satisfaction and a dozen missed calls. Sarah had spent the night in jail, and while she probably thought her high-powered lawyer boyfriend would swoop in to save her, she had no idea what was coming next. I poured myself a cup of coffee, turned on the news, and there it was, her mugshot plastered on the screen. Breaking news. prominent corporate executive arrested for false police report and fraud allegations. I nearly choked on my coffee. I knew the local news would cover it. But this was front-page material. The news anchor continued. Sources confirm that Sarah Reynolds was arrested late last night for allegedly attempting to frame her husband, a decorated police officer, for domestic violence. The arrest has shocked the community, raising concerns about false abuse allegations and legal manipulation in high-profile divorces. I smirked. Damn right it raised concerns. But that wasn't the best part. No, the best part was still to come. Hartman's career goes up in flames. I had planned for maximum damage, and Sarah's arrest was only phase 1. The real bomb? That was about to drop on David Hartman. I checked my email. Sure enough, Carter had come through for me. He had leaked the evidence we collected, not just to the police but to every major legal board in the state. Hartman wasn't just some sleazy divorce attorney. He was a big-name legal figure, a consultant for judges, a speaker at high-profile law conferences. And now, he was about to be disbarred. By noon, his firm had issued a public statement. Effective immediately, David L. Hartman has been placed on indefinite leave pending an internal investigation into allegations of professional misconduct and conspiracy to commit fraud. Translation: they threw him under the bus. And it got worse. A few hours later, a whistleblower from Hartman's own firm leaked even more dirt to the press. Turns out, this wasn't his first time pulling something like this. Hartman has a history of advising female clients to manufacture evidence in divorce cases. One anonymous legal associate claimed. It was a well-known secret at the firm. If you wanted to get your husband out of the house and secure an easy win, Hartman was your guy. That was it. The final nail in his coffin. The State Bar Association launched a formal investigation within 48 hours. Hartman resigned in disgrace. And just like that, he lost everything. Sarah's downfall. By the time Sarah got out on bail, her life was completely unrecognizable. Her company suspended her. Her bank accounts were frozen. And oh yeah, she had nowhere to go. Because while she was sitting in a holding cell, I had already filed for divorce and sole ownership of the house. The restraining order I got against her, that meant she couldn't even step foot on the property. So when she finally showed up at the house, looking exhausted, humiliated, and desperate, I was waiting for her on the porch. She took one look at me and exploded. You ruined my life," she shrieked. I crossed my arms. "No, Sarah. You did that all by yourself." Her nostrils flared, and for a moment, I could tell she wanted to hit me. But even she wasn't that stupid. Instead, she lunged for the door. That's when I held up a manila envelope and waved it in her face. "What's this?" I asked casually. "Oh, right, your official divorce papers. And a formal eviction notice." Her face drained of color. "Eviction?" she whispered. I shrugged. "This house? It was never in your name." She staggered back, looking like she might be sick. And just for good measure, I grinned. "Oh, and before I forget." I pulled one last paper from the folder and handed it to her. She scanned it quickly, her hands shaking. Notice of pending civil lawsuit. Plaintiff Jack Reynolds. Defendant Sarah Reynolds. Cause: damages for defamation, fraud, and emotional distress. Her eyes snapped up. "You're suing me?" I nodded. "Every single penny you tried to take from me, I'm taking it back." The final humiliation. Sarah had nothing left. Her career, destroyed. Her reputation, shattered. Her high-powered lawyer boyfriend, gone. She tried begging me to drop the charges. Then she tried threatening me. But in the end, she had no leverage left. She left that night with nothing but a suitcase and a broken life. And as she drove off, I felt zero remorse. Because she thought she could frame me for abuse, ruin my career, and steal my life. Instead, she lost everything. And me? I walked away completely free. It had been 3 months since Sarah tried to ruin me. Now, she was the one living in ruin. Her trial for filing a false police report and conspiracy to commit fraud was set for next month. And her former lawyer boyfriend, David Hartman, had completely abandoned her. He never even tried to contact her after his career went up in flames. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Sarah was now crashing on a friend's couch, struggling to find a job, and drowning in legal fees. She had no money, no home, and no reputation left. And me? I was finally free. One last encounter. I hadn't seen Sarah since the night she stood on my porch, shaking with rage and disbelief as I served her divorce papers and an eviction notice. But then, one afternoon, I ran into her at a local coffee shop. She looked nothing like the woman I used to know. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes cheap and mismatched, and there were dark circles under her eyes. For the first time in her life, she looked ordinary. She saw me the same moment I saw her. Her jaw clenched, and she stood frozen, unsure of what to say. I took a sip of my coffee, unbothered. "Sarah." She swallowed hard. "Jack." For a moment, she just stared at me, her lips parting like she wanted to say something. Maybe to apologize, maybe to justify herself. Instead, she just sighed, shook her head, and looked away. She knew there was nothing left to say. She had lost. And for the first time, I could tell she finally understood that. She turned on her heel and walked out, leaving me there with my coffee and the quiet satisfaction of victory. The lawsuit's final blow. A month later, my civil lawsuit against Sarah was settled. She had fought it at first, thinking she could still win something out of this. But her lawyer was a public defender, a far cry from the high-profile attorneys she was used to. In the end, she had no choice but to settle. She agreed to pay me back every cent of the money she had siphoned off our accounts before I caught her. Of course, she had no way to actually pay it. So the judge ordered wage garnishment, which meant that whatever minimum wage job she managed to find, I'd be getting a cut of it. Every paycheck. For years, she had tried to trap me in financial ruin. Instead, she had become my personal ATM. Poetic justice at its finest. Moving on without looking back. People always ask, did you ever regret it? The revenge. Not for a second. Sarah tried to destroy me, frame me, and take everything I built. She didn't just cheat. She tried to erase me. And for that, she got exactly what she deserved. But the most important thing wasn't that she lost. It was that I won. I walked away with my career, my home, my finances, and my reputation intact. And most of all, I walked away free. No more paranoia. No more walking on eggshells. No more fake love. Just me, my peace of mind, and a future that was finally mine again. Epilogue, the best revenge. Years later, I heard that Sarah had left town, moving to another state for a fresh start. I never looked her up. I never checked in to see how she was doing, because I didn't care. She was just a chapter in my past, one that I had closed permanently. And as for me, I lived happily, successfully, and without regret, because the best revenge is living well. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.